Hey guys, I've got a treat for you today. I'm going to be doing a live Q&A here in just a moment with Anna Detari, who is a specialist in musicians' focal dystonia. So a little while ago, we had her on, and here she is, had her on our podcast called the Tuned and Strong podcast, and she was talking all about what she's been doing, and so we're going to invite her here just a second to talk about what she's up to. Anna. She should be here any second. So, yes, there we go. There we are.
Hi, can you see me, Henny? Okay.
Yes. Hi, Anna. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm really excited to have this session with you. And for those who don't know exactly what focal dystonia is, can you talk a little bit about what that is real quick?
Yeah, real quick. So musicians' focal dystonia is a neurological movement disorder. It is task specific, meaning that basically it impairs the fine motor movement only when doing a specific task. In the case of musicians' focal dystonia, it's playing the instrument. There are other types of task-specific dystonia, including sports, dance, all sorts of things, but let's just focus on musicians now. And we know very little what actually causes it. And the treatment options are quite restricted, especially the medical ones. And yeah, what else? I don't know if the listeners know this, but I'm doing my PhD on the topic, and I find it real hard to have this very quick and not so version. But basically what happens is that after years and years of training, you lose the control over the fine motor movement of your body. It generally happens either in the fingers or the facial muscles, the embouchure, but it can happen also in the neck, shoulders, even the feet for organists or people playing the drum set. So the symptoms vary, and it generally manifests itself in a form of cramps, extreme weakness, weird tremor sensation. So basically the result is losing that super sense of fine motor movement, and basically can end successful careers because of that.
Yeah, and so that's why we called our episode with you "The Monster Under the Bed," because this is the topic that we're all afraid to talk about. We're afraid to admit if we actually have it. We're afraid to even know, I don't want to get diagnosed. What do I do? It's a death sentence for my career. But what you're finding out in your research is that it's not actually a death sentence for your career anymore, right?
Yeah, so basically there are ways, we learn more and more about different ways to retrain from it. And still there is no magic pill, unfortunately, to give to people and just give the movement ability back. But we can use the neuroplasticity to retrain certain movements which went wrong. And these so-called behavioral strategies or neural retraining strategies been around for a while. It's quite restricted in the literature, but musicians been around retraining themselves for quite a while. It obviously is very dependent on the severity and how long you've been having it. But there are many cases where it's absolutely possible to retrain.
That's really great. And if you guys who are watching have any questions, please drop them in the comments below so we can get to those. I have a question. So I have a bassist friend who mentioned that he's got focal dystonia in his fretting hand. And I first came across him, well, I want to say this was 2014. This was a long time ago. And he's been playing with it ever since, but it's been really difficult for him. He said that what he's heard is that focal dystonia in your fretting hand is one of the more difficult types to deal with. Have you had any experience with that? I mean, do you know anybody who's had that, or does that ring true, or is that just what he's heard?
I've been working with musicians for the past 7 years with focal dystonia, and I've seen a lot of different kinds. And I wouldn't say that one is more difficult to retrain than the other. It's more, I wouldn't say that it's depends on which part of your body you're having it. It's more like the severity of the symptoms and the complexity of the symptoms. If you have had embouchure dystonia, then you probably say that, oh, embouchure dystonia is the hardest to retrain because you have way less control over the facial muscles. We use them in a much more like subconscious and restrictive way. With the hands, we manipulate objects all the time. So some people find that actually the retraining can is more easy, but there are some arguments and counter arguments. But what I would say, it's like dependent on the case, on the severity of that given case, rather than this is the worst and that's the second worst and so on.
That's really encouraging, actually. That's good to know. Another thing that I have heard is that, there are musicians who end up going to, they're trying to figure out what's causing this, who do I see? And so they end up going to seeing neurologists, and we've heard about Botox. And can you speak just a little bit about the different treatment options and what you've seen be effective and not effective, and just, give us a little rundown?
Yeah, so generally I would say it would be quite important to actually be diagnosed by a neurologist for so the reason for that is not because you're going to receive amazing help from most neurologists, but it's very important to rule out other types of conditions, neurological conditions, which might cause similar symptoms. So you don't really want to start retraining from focal dystonia if you end up having Parkinson's or an E or a brain tumor or something. That there are so many different physical and neurological conditions which can mask as a focal dystonia symptom, and we are very, very fine-tuned into our instrumental playing. So it's quite possible that there is a Parkinson's symptom appearing, and we're going to notice it first on the instrument because we have such a level of control of playing, and we don't really notice it somewhere else. So therefore, I think it's very important to, if you can, just go ahead and get a diagnosis from a neurologist. But what they usually suggest is either botulinum toxin injections, Botox injections for the affected muscles, which I do not find very effective. In fact, in the literature, they say about 1/3 of the people getting Botox for their musicians' dystonia experience any form of improvement. And we are not talking about full recovery, we're talking of any form of improvement. Basically, what the drug is, it blocks the muscle from, it paralyzes the muscle. But since this is a neurological condition, this is very clearly a symptomatic treatment. In some places, they only use it when there is like one very specific standout symptom, like one finger curling or one finger coming up. But very often, when people play with focal dystonia, they start to develop certain compensatory mechanisms, which can be mistaken as the dystonic symptom. So it's super hard to tell which muscles to block if you want to block anything. I'm not really a big fan of Botox. I can imagine why some people getting it, like there is one very annoying symptom and just can't go past it. In fact, Eckhard Altemüller, who's a neurologist in Germany and is in the forefront of focal dystonia research, basically what he says is try retraining first, and if the retraining doesn't work or doesn't proceed as quickly as it should be, then the practitioner sends the patient back to him, and then they consider Botox. But he doesn't use Botox as a first line anymore. The other option is oral medications. Oral medications are not specifically developed for dystonia. They generally give you Parkinson drugs to support the movement control. Again, same thing in literature, about 1/3 of people report some form of improvement. But interesting thing that those who report improvement, those are the ones who also report more side effects. So it's either doesn't work at all, doesn't do anything, or it does improve the movement, but it also creates quite severe side effects. And with the Botox, I forgot to mention that you have to retake the injection every 3-4 months, because basically the drug is going out from your system. And then the long-term impact of repeated Botox injection is muscle atrophy. So basically it can kill off your muscle cells. So if you want to retrain, like having taken Botox for 20 years, literally don't really have the musculature to work with that body part. And then obviously we mentioned already behavioral movement retraining strategies, which I'm a big believer of. And I retrained myself the same way. I had embouchure dystonia in 2010 and retrained myself with 4 years of work, and it worked fine for me. And I've seen many, many cases in the past 7 years to retrain themselves and then return to their careers. So I think that's the way forward, to have a more sort of holistic approach. We talked a lot about this in the episode, have a sort of more holistic approach of the entire human being rather than just like viewing that one twitching finger as the symptom and doing like stuff to stop that finger from twitching.
Right. I mean, this is the symptom, not the cause. So we need to treat the cause and what's going on. Have you noticed with anybody who tends to develop focal dystonia, have you noticed a pattern of the types of people who tend to develop it, or something like that's similar among these types of people that they can be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I mean, it's also well documented if you look at the scientific literature. So in terms of personality traits, you generally mention perfectionism and anxiety and obsessiveness and just like overwork, and very often there is an overuse, even physical injury from overuse preceding the onset of the focal dystonia. But what I'm interested in my own research, that, okay, maybe perfectionism is present, anxiety is present, these obsessive tendencies are present, but where do they come from? And in my research, I'm looking at a lot the social environmental factors, music educational factors. So where did we learn that only the 200% is good enough? What are those environmental factors which have such an impact on a person that they start, going down this road of like practicing 10 hours a day and like very unhealthy behaviors? So it does come from somewhere. So I'm much more interested in, because it feels a little bit like victim blaming to me, that, oh, you're such a perfectionist, you're such an obsessive practicer, you made this happen, you got yourself focal dystonia, it's your fault. But there is like this like unspoken narrative behind it. So that's why I was really interested in more of the whole picture, how these characteristics develop and under what pressure. And very often the onset happens after like a traumatic change or change of instrument or change of teacher, trying to fix something, trying to really hard working something, preparing for an audition, for example, increased stress, mental stress, but also like increased stress on the body, while, very often not in super healthy postures. We just like for 8 hours a day.
Yeah, no kidding. So what is the research that you are doing at the moment? What is it focused on?
So originally I just wanted to look at all the so-called non-organic factors in focal dystonia in the onset, and with the goal of identifying these things and then seeing how these things impact the person when they already experience focal dystonia and how that can inform the treatment. So it's all about really enhancing the treatment, but I need to know where these certain things came from in order to be able to fix them on the other end. So my research is primarily focused on these personal experiences and music education, the impact of trauma, certain psychological traits like mistake rumination and the perfectionism. Because if you want to treat someone with a condition, you have to be aware that these people like end up, step into your practice or in the neurologist's office having those things in their minds and having those experiences, and then you have to tailor whatever approach you're using to their specific case and to just keeping in mind these, because very often like behavior therapies, they include repetitions of sort of like newly learned movement. Okay, this is the way your hand wants to do it because of dystonia, but we're going to do it this way, slow practice. And people have the tendency that, oh, now I have a recipe, what to do? Let's sit down and practice this 12 hours a day. And it's not supported. So you have to be very aware how these people, and myself included, like me included, because I'm this in that group of people and population, like how we function and understand that in order to build up a retraining program which is really beneficial and can push us forward the best way possible.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So when you find the thing that caused it and then you find something different, the tendency of these people is to want to just, yes, more of that. Like, I've seen that so often in musicians. I mean, we just want to get it right. We want to do our best, but we can be hyper fixated and hyper focused And that's
Absolutely.
some of what you're seeing with the people who develop this in the first place, is that hyperfixation of
Yeah.
perfectionism of I will work until I get this right, which can cause issues in certain areas. There was
Yeah, and also,
this whole week. Go ahead.
or just like you just mentioned, focus, and I think that's a very, very important point to make, because this is also something I was very interested in looking at in my own research. Is in sports psychology, there is distinction between internal and external focus, like how much you're focusing inside your body and your body part as you're executing a certain movement. So, for example, you're throwing a ball. Are you going to focus on your wrist throwing that ball, or are you going to like focus on the trajectory or the thing you want to hit with the ball? And there is like excessive research in sports psychology which shows that external focus is superior. So the more you try to like supervise a already automated movement, the more you're going to just get in your own way. And then in music, we like my team also replicated one of these studies. We looked at like piano playing, and there are some studies of violin bowing, for example, looking at how different cognitive focus can change the motor behavior. So if I'm just really focusing on getting those notes right with my bow, I might have excessive tension in my biceps. I might start have like extra effort. If I'm focusing on the sound, or if I'm focusing on my output, many of those motor issues sort of solve themselves. And this is the other thing which I found in my own research, that many people talk about having teachers actively teaching them to pay attention to these small technical aspects of the instrumental playing. Like, this is how high you should raise your finger from a fretting board, and no, that's too high, no, that's okay. And then it's like tiny aspects which basically creates a very strong internal focus. And this like embodied rumination continues, like, what is my finger doing? And I think this is something anyone can experience. Like, if you ever run down the stairs really quickly, and in the middle you suddenly like, oh, how is my body doing this? You immediately stumble, right? You immediately like,
done that.
so basically that's the idea. So this is also something which the retraining should, look for, that like, where is your focus? How are you going to direct that focus while you're retraining the student? And it's even harder than normal playing, because the symptom is going to call your attention in. I mean, I can't, it's cramping, and obviously that's going to, put my increased focus, and it's actually going to make it worse.
Right. So you're trying not to focus that. You're focusing externally. Despite the symptoms, you're thinking of something else. Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the way I usually use it in my own coaching, I go for this term movement quality. So we are looking for a movement which has a very clear intention. I'm going from A to B, a very clear direction, and no hesitation. Because the moment you start supervising, there is this kind of quality of hesitation, which I like to call this hot cup sensation. You have like a cup of hot liquid, and you feel steaming, and you sort of like want to touch it, but you don't know how hot it is. So you're going to like try first before you grab it. And there is this quality which definitely going to lead to the symptom. So in my own practice, what I do, I use very, very simple movements, but make sure that quality of that movement in terms of like intention and direction is super clear. I mean, like, sometimes get pianists like literally just like putting their palms or even the back of their hands on the keys, just to learn that this is okay, and I don't have to like fix it to make it nice.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay. So that's really, really interesting. We go more into this in the episodes. If you guys have not watched or listened to the Tuned and Strong podcast, episode 39 with Anna, you need to go listen to that, because we go into depth. But what we talked about with Mark Wallace a little while ago, and he mentioned that he had this whole setup with his embouchure that he would just do, like, he would like do things with his lips and his tongue and his teeth, and he didn't even know he was doing it. But it was like, just noticing that he was going to play triggered this response of, like you said, like you're trying to gauge what to do in this whole setup. And so just getting him used to putting his flute somewhere else without doing that. So it wasn't he's focused on here. It's like, just put it here. Or the pianist, just put your hand, put it different. It's okay.
Exactly.
So we also talked about this in the episode, is that to not just avoiding this, but helping with the process, is approaching your instrument with a sense of curiosity. instead of like demanding, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then, like to cultivate that sort of curiosity, you sort of have to give up your expectations that I know the level I can play at. Like from my own personal example, I spent the first 2 years of my retraining like trying to force to make a sound. Like my embouchure dystonia was extremely severe. I completely lost the ability to make a sound. There was no sound, no matter how I tried. And that in my head, it was like Prokofiev Sonata and then Mozart, and then I can do this. And then just reach that level where you're standing there with the head joint and you produce this very weak sound like a little sick mouse and be happy with it.
Yeah.
It's a journey. It's a journey because then you have to like sort of build it up and be content whatever it comes. And this like on really unknown like expectation in the back of your head, but I am this big musician and I'm amazing, and that's all in your head that you carry that, but somehow the channel is broken. Your musicality is still sitting up there, your knowledge of the instrument, your knowledge of the pieces, but you have to be very patient to fix the broken channel between that and the outside world.
Yeah, making sure that you understand, like, yes, you are this great musician. Yes, the ability is still there. Yes, all of this, but letting go of that expectation of, I know I can play this right. I know what I sound like. I know.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we try this? That is really brilliant because you don't hear this a lot. And what we did kind of dig into in the episode was about teachers who really kind of the hyperfixation and the focus on your fingers have to be just so, or why does your embouchure look this way? It should look this way, or something like that. I have one more question for you before we switch channels. But how do you see people developing things like? I know of a musician on here actually. She's got focal dystonia in her shoulder, and she plays guitar. So I'm curious, how do you get something in a larger muscle group like that? I mean, we don't usually think of that. We usually think of fingers or lips. How do you explain something like that? I mean, for those of us who don't really kind of understand what that means.
Yeah, so it's indeed much more typical to get it in the small muscle groups and then the small like the direct contact with the instrument, because that's where you want to fix something. Like something goes wrong, I need to fix it here, or I need to fix it there. But I worked with a couple of people who had dystonia in the neck, for example, embouchure problems, but basically the dystonia ended up in their neck. So every single time they tried to get to the instrument, she was an oboist, her neck would go trying to get away from the instrument. And I've seen videos of a horn player very similar. He just like tried to place the mouthpiece on his mouth, and the neck would try to get away. So you don't even get to that point where you actually get in touch with the instrument. And I can imagine something going on with the shoulders there, that sort of like something is holding back. Something is just like, oh, we have this experience of like keep trying, it's not good enough. And there is like a very negative emotional state. And then sort of body's like, you know what, I don't really want to go there. And it becomes similar to like trying to reach into a flame. Your body is going to like, no. Even if you decide, okay, I'm going to reach into that flame, your body is going to override that and say that, nope, you're not going to do that. It's going to be painful.
That is super fascinating. So there's really a large connection between focal dystonia and psychology actually going on, not just, the physical symptoms.
I mean, like, I always found that this distinction between neurology and psychology is always a little bit silly. It's the same organ. And if you look at the research, they find more and more that, like with, for example, neurological movement disorder, there are always some form of accompanying psychological issues, and then with some psychological issues, there are some accompanying neurological problems. So it's overlaps quite a lot, and we don't really know enough of the brain to really determine, like, okay, that bit causes this and this bit causes. It's all interlinked in many ways. So when psychology, yes. I would say that the brain is incredibly, like, the plasticity is incredibly quick. So if you experience something with a negative, in a negative way repeatedly, it's going to learn that this is not great for me. And there are some very, very quick learning processes, just I mentioned, like reaching into the fire or touching the hob. You do it only once when you're a child to learn that this is not a great idea. But, you know, when that underlying negative emotional thing is more subtle, and there is some joy next to it because you like to play the instrument, but your teacher says you're rubbish. But you like to play the instrument, but this happens, but there is this stressor, and so on and so on. That negativity sort of builds up and it gets associated with the playing. And after a while, I don't know really about the, you know, other people with dystonia. You don't really go in such depth conversation, but I reached a point in my own career when I just hated playing the flute. In many ways, like in my head, I was like, okay, this is my identity. But I had so many negative experiences built on top of each other. That was like my base reaction was fear and anxiety around it rather than joy. So that sort of conditioning can have a huge impact on how the body reacts.
That's absolutely fascinating. Okay, so I want to continue this conversation over on Facebook. Guys, we started it here and we're going to be able to download it and share it here. But we started it here because Facebook is being super glitchy. So better to have this than not. But where can people find you if they want to contact you or find out more about your research and what you're doing? If they have questions.
Yeah, so I have a website, musicians-focal-dystonia.com. And then there is a contact there, my email. They can just like email me asking questions, but I also aim to collect together quite a large amount of material, which is basically divided into my own opinions, and then what I just sort of collected from scientific findings through my readings and my research. So I try to keep those two things apart. Obviously, my like scientific research and all my readings going to inform my own work with dystonia sufferers, but I don't want to get people think that what my take on dystonia is the thing. Let's just get that to the science. Let's just, you know, get all these details scientifically proven. So I really want to like separate my own opinion and what actually has been looked at and proven with scientific method, which is much more reliable. So that's all the material there, but you can just go ahead, read the blogs and blog posts and just get in touch.
Yeah, and you also have other resources on your website as well, yeah?
Yes. I have a wonderful friend of mine, Katie Berglof. She did a set of interviews with dystonia sufferers who recovered. And then she allowed me to share those resources on my website. So there are like 10 interviews there. You can listen to different people who recovered from focal dystonia. And yeah, also the reading suggested books, blog posts, summaries of the literature. That's more or less it, I think.
That's perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to hop over on the other channel if you guys want to join us. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us, Anna. Really appreciate it. You guys go listen to the Tuned and Strong podcast, episode 39, to hear more about this. Heights, have a great day.